For those skeptical among us, this week's Strangeries episode may just persuade you that reincarnation really is possible. Our bodies may just be shells that carry our souls until the next one comes along, much like hermit crabs which live in borrowed shells. Personally, I have always believed that when we do pass away, our bodies are given back to Mother Earth, but our souls move on. Perhaps I am getting a little spiritual here, so I'll let the stories of reincarnation do the talking. Eli Lash was a well-known and respected Israeli doctor and professor of medicine. He sadly passed away in 2009, but some years before his death, he recounted an incident he was involved in to Druse, who is one of Germany's leading regression therapists. Whilst Dr. Lash was in Golan Heights, which is located within the Israeli and Syrian borders, he had witnessed a 3-year-old Druse boy talk about his past life and how he was murdered by a neighbour with an axe. The Druse believe in reincarnation, and when a baby is born they look for birthmarks, which in their belief are indicators of death wounds from their previous life. A group of 15 Druse men, including the 3-year-old boy, searched for the village in which the boy had lived in his previous life. When the boy recognised the village, they immediately stopped and went looking for the place in which he had died. The young boy took them to his house and then spoke to a man who was his former neighbour. The boy said to the man, "Aren't you?" but he could not remember the name, but the man answered yes. The boy went on to say to this man that they had a fight and that the man killed him with an axe. The boy knew where he was buried and took the group and this man to a field, and sure enough, under a pile of rocks were the remains of a man with a split in the front of his skull. The boy said that the axe is over there and showed them where the buried axe was. The man was as white as a sheet at this point and had to confess to his crime. This man did actually disappear from the village for 4 years at the time of the murder, which was likely an indication of his guilt. The group said that they would not hand the man over to the police, but would discuss an appropriate punishment for him between themselves. John and Florence Pollock, who lived in Hexham, England with their daughters Jacqueline and Joanna, lived what most would consider a perfect life. However, their lives would be turned upside down on May 5, 1957, whilst on their way to church. Both daughters and their friend Anthony Layden were struck by a car and died instantly. Understandably, John and Florence were utterly devastated, but held out hope that they would be blessed with another child in the near future. Their hopes were answered and Florence once more became pregnant. Their doctor informed them that she was carrying just one child, but John was convinced she had the reincarnated souls of their deceased daughters within her, despite his Catholic religion, which stood firmly against the notion of reincarnation. On the 4th of October 1958, John's hunch turned out to be correct, and Florence gave birth to twin girls and named them Gillian and Jennifer. John noticed that Jennifer had a strange white line across her forehead, similar to the scar that Jacqueline had from a bike accident. She also had an identical birthmark to Jacqueline. They moved to Whitley Bay when Gillian and Jennifer were 3 months old and did not return to Hexham until the twins were 4 years old. The girls started pointing to landmarks that they had never been to before, and when they passed the school that Jacqueline and Joanna attended, they said it was their school. The girls were also able to correctly name every teddy bear that belonged to their dead sisters. Gillian was heard saying to Jennifer that blood was coming from her eyes from where the car had hit her. And another time, they went into a complete frenzy when they heard a car's engine ticking over and screamed, "The car is coming to get us." James Leininger was born on April 10, 1998 to Bruce and Andrea, who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area of California. Bruce was offered a job as Human Resources Director for an oil industry company, and as a result they moved to Lafayette, Louisiana, where James would grow up. From the age of 2, James started to recount his previous life as a fighter pilot from World War II named James Huston Jr. Leininger had vivid nightmares of a plane crash which killed the pilot during the invasion of Iwo Jima. Huston was the only pilot to die in the battle. He would kick his blankets as if trying to escape a burning cockpit and shout things such as "airplane crash, can't get out." He was able to recall so much information from the battle which no one would really know unless they had extensive personal knowledge of Iwo Jima. Like the name of another pilot, Jack Larson, who was indeed friends with James Huston Jr. He was able to recall the name of the aircraft carrier his plane flew from, which was the Natoma Bay, and that he flew a plane known as a Corsair. There were even times he would correct narrators on documentary programs about World War II, such as the names of Japanese planes which were called Zeros and Tonys. According to Jim Tucker, who is a psychologist at the University of Virginia, everything that James Leininger recounted happened exactly the way he described. So, have these stories of reincarnation convinced you that it is indeed possible for our souls to be reborn? Or are you still a skeptic who thinks that rebirth is just superstitious nonsense? Whatever the case may be, it's undeniable that these stories are simply fascinating. That young children could recount such detail about a battle that took place several decades before their birth, or that they knew who their murderer was and where they were buried. As with every episode, I'd love to know what you think, so why not leave a comment in the comments section of the video and start a discussion on reincarnation. Tune in next Sunday for another Strangeries story. Thanks for watching.